My family took everything in court. Every word they spoke was poison, but everyone believed them. Until I slid the file across the bench and watched their empire collapse in silence. That file held what no one expected. The truth. Raw. Dangerous. Undeniable. And in that moment, I didn't win. I reclaimed what was mine. They didn't scream. They didn't throw punches. They didn't even raise their voices. They just signed the papers. 3 clean signatures at the bottom of a lawsuit. My mother's, my brother's, and my sister's. All aligned. All calculated. All ready to bury me alive. The same people who stood beside me at the funeral in designer black and crocodile tears. The same family that posed for photos next to my father's casket like it was a press release. That's how I knew. They didn't mourn him. They repositioned. They smiled at me through glassy eyes, arms around each other. And I stood alone. No tears, no performance, no handshake with the estate lawyer. Just silence. Sharp. Controlled. They thought I looked out of place. I was the only one not pretending. 1 week later, the will was read. My father left me controlling interest in Holt Pacific Group, his life's work, his power, his legacy. To the rest, he left assets. To me, he left the crown. And then, the knives came out. The lawsuit arrived wrapped in ivory cardstock and cold contempt. They accused me of manipulation, fraud, faking my service record, gaslighting a dying man. Even the military files they dragged into it weren't enough for them. They tried to rewrite my life like it was a press pitch. My own mother co-signed it. My sister led the charge. My brother hid behind spreadsheets. And all 3 moved like clockwork. There were no confrontations, no heated arguments, no begging, just strategy. That was the part that made me stop blinking. They didn't want justice. They wanted erasure. It wasn't about the company. It was about power, optics, control. It always was. My sister was the face. My brother was the numbers. My mother was the shadow behind the throne. And I was the glitch in the system. The reminder that someone in this family didn't need applause to lead. That someone knew how to win without noise. They didn't want to fight me. They wanted me to vanish. What they didn't know, what they never bothered to ask, was that silence is where I thrive. They'd mistaken my absence for surrender, but I wasn't gone. I was gathering. While they ran PR plays and hosted foundation galas in my father's name, I stayed quiet. While they leaked stories and manipulated timelines, I watched, listened, took notes, and I waited. Because I didn't come back to be accepted. I didn't come back for closure. I came back to take what was already mine. And they were never going to see it coming. They thought I'd play defense. They were wrong. I didn't return to clear my name. I came to end theirs. What happened next didn't just shift the courtroom. It detonated the entire family empire. I used to think dysfunction had a sound. Raised voices, slammed doors, footsteps storming down hardwood stairs. But I was wrong. Real dysfunction is quiet. It's the way your mother refills her wine glass instead of answering your question. It's your sister smiling at you like a politician. It's the moment you realize no one at the table actually sees you. That was my family. We didn't argue. We negotiated. Every holiday was a press event. Every dinner, a meeting. My mother, Vivienne, had a voice like velvet and eyes like polished ice. Nothing got to her, unless it dented the family image, and she was brilliant at making everything look perfect, especially us. Adrienne was her star pupil. Blonde, bright, sharp in all the right ways. She could walk into any room and own it. She didn't just follow the rules. She rewrote them so they always pointed to her. Landon was the structure. Spreadsheets, strategy, silent judgment from behind tortoiseshell glasses. Together, They ran Holt Pacific like a legacy brand, a curated empire built on recycled materials, ocean view boardrooms, and glossy press releases about sustainability and impact. And then there was me. I was the outlier, the fracture line, the part of the puzzle they couldn't sand down to fit. When I left at 18 to join the Navy, no one followed me to the airport. My mother sent a car. Adrian didn't say goodbye. My father handed me a check and a short nod, like he was paying off a liability. The last thing he said to me was, "You'll learn discipline the hard way, I suppose." He wasn't wrong. For years, I served overseas, places with names they never learned to pronounce. I built encryption firewalls in war zones, lost friends, collected scars, came home carrying silence like a second skin, and not once, did any of them ask where I'd been. To them, I had defected, not from the family, but from the brand. So when I showed up again, older, quieter, with my father's controlling shares in hand, I didn't just disrupt their narrative, I threatened their ownership of it. Vivian didn't scream. She smiled. Adrian acted like she was thrilled. Landon asked if I'd be staying long. They offered me champagne and compliments and made it clear I was a guest in a house they now considered theirs. But I saw the cracks. I watched Adrienne clutch her champagne flute tighter every time I spoke. I noticed how Landon flinched when I mentioned a forensic audit. And I recognized the look in my mother's eyes when she leaned in and said, "Let's not dig up the past, Marin. Let's move forward as a family." Which, in our language, meant, don't ask questions, don't challenge us, play nice, or get out. I didn't get out. I sat in the corner of every boardroom, said little, took notes, let them talk. They mistook my silence for surrender. Again. And then, little by little, things started to surface. Not from outside, from within. An unsigned envelope left at my door. A financial document misfiled in the company drive. An internal email chain archived under the wrong label. It wasn't sabotage. It was something more powerful. It was truth, seeping through the cracks they'd tried to plaster over with perfect lighting and clean lines. And behind that truth, something else. Someone else. He was the only one who didn't take a side. Until the night he showed up at my door, soaked in rain and shaking, carrying a flash drive and a decision I didn't ask for, but would change everything. Because when the one person who's always stayed silent finally chooses a side, you learn just how loud the truth can be. He didn't speak right away. Just stood there on my porch, rain soaking through his blazer, knuckles white around a plastic USB case. His name was Carter. My cousin. Barely. We'd shared a handful of summers as kids before his parents moved east, and I hadn't seen him in years. He'd always been quiet. The one in the background. The one who watched and listened and never forgot a thing. That night, he looked like he'd been carrying a secret for too long, and it had finally started to rot him from the inside. "I shouldn't be here," he said, voice low. "But you need to see this." He handed me the drive like it burned. I didn't ask questions, just stepped aside and let him in. He didn't take off his coat, didn't sit, just stood by the window like someone might be watching. I plugged the drive into my laptop. A single folder appeared. Covenant. Inside were documents, scanned signatures, asset transfers, internal memos, and, buried halfway down, a private message chain between Adrian and my mother. Each line felt like a scalpel. Clean, precise, designed to cut in silence. They'd known, for over a year, that my father had left his controlling shares to me, that his will had named me executor, not Vivienne, that his estate included a fail-safe clause preventing the board from voting without my input. And they'd buried it under legal ambiguities and administrative delays. They had created a paper wall so dense even the firm's own paralegals couldn't untangle it. And while I was still overseas attending his funeral via live stream, they were moving pieces, signing deals, rerouting assets, redrafting bylaws to erase me completely. Vivian's message said it best. Marin won't push. She never does. She doesn't understand the game. Adrienne's reply. She left the table. That's not silence, it's surrender. I didn't breathe for a full minute. Behind me, Carter shifted. I found it by accident. The board never saw it. They hid it in a sealed folder marked HR inquiries. I copied it, encrypted it, sat on it for 6 months. I wasn't sure if you'd... He trailed off. If I'd what? I asked, flat. If you'd be strong enough to use it. I looked up at him, and in that moment, the air in the room changed. I'm not using it, I said. He blinked, confused. I'm weaponizing it. Because this wasn't about fairness. It wasn't even about revenge. It was about ending a game they thought I never knew how to play, about showing them I'd been paying attention, not just to what they said, but to what they were afraid to admit out loud. The next day, I walked into the quarterly board meeting 10 minutes late. No makeup, no apologies, just a single manila envelope and a thumb drive in my bag. Vivian smiled her political smile. Adrienne was mid-sentence about projected growth in Q3. I let her finish. Then I opened the envelope and slid a copy of the email chain across the table. Silence isn't always weakness. Sometimes it's just the sound of the storm gathering speed. And I had just pulled the pin. They thought the fallout would be quiet. But you can't contain a truth that's been starved too long. And when the first domino fell, it didn't stop with Adrienne. It reached deeper, into places I hadn't even realized they were hiding something, until one name appeared I never expected to see. The courtroom wasn't cold, it was clinical. Polished floors, spotless wood, light too bright to feel safe under. It smelled like old paper and new lies. I didn't wear black. I wore midnight blue, sharper, colder. No jewelry, no mascara. I didn't come to mourn. I came to finish it. Vivian was already seated. So was Adrienne, and our mother. She didn't even look at me, which, ironically, was the most honest thing she'd done in years. The attorneys buzzed like flies. Motions, objections, exhibits, statements. But I wasn't listening. I watched. How Adrienne tapped her pen when nervous. How Vivian crossed her legs the same way our mother did. How no one in my family had ever been taught to sit still under pressure. They called me to the stand. I stood, walked. Each heel click a quiet defiance. I didn't look at them. Not because I was afraid, but because I wanted them to know they no longer mattered. I wasn't here for their guilt. I was here for leverage. My lawyer asked nothing unnecessary, just enough to lay the foundation. My father's original wishes, the corporate bylaws, the timing of his passing, then the emails. I watched Adrienne freeze when her own words were read aloud. Marin won't fight. She never has. She blinked fast, but she didn't speak. Then the cross-examination began. Vivian's attorney was slick, confident, too confident. So you're suggesting your entire family conspired to commit fraud against you? I didn't answer immediately. I tilted my head, let the silence stretch. I'm not suggesting, I said. I'm proving it. He smirked. You're implying that your own mother lied under oath? I looked straight at my mother, not with anger, with clarity, with distance. I'm saying she taught us all how to lie. I just stopped practicing. He faltered. Just for a second. But that was all I needed. My attorney handed me the final document, the amendment, signed by Adrienne, backdated. The ink analysis was indisputable. Even the notary had flipped. The room shifted. The air thinned. Vivian's foot tapped uncontrollably. My mother finally looked at me, but not with regret, with fear. They weren't scared of losing. They were scared of being seen, of no longer hiding behind last names and legacy. I had dragged the truth into the open, and it didn't blink. When the judge called recess, no one moved. The bailiff had to clear the room. I didn't stay. I didn't smile. I walked straight out the side door, the one Adrian had used to avoid the press last year. Only this time, the flashbulbs were for me. Not because I was the victim, but because I had changed the entire game. Everyone assumed Adrian would take the fall, but snakes don't bite alone. When the verdict came down, a name appeared on the fraud ledger I hadn't seen before, one that shattered the last piece of whatever daughter I used to be. And it came from the person I trusted most. When the gavel struck, the room didn't erupt. No gasps, no tears, just silence. Thick, stifling silence that felt louder than any scream. Across the aisle, my family stared like the verdict had stolen their air. Their expressions cracked, not from shock, but recognition. They finally saw me, not the version they painted in court, but the one who had outmaneuvered them in silence. I didn't smile. I didn't gloat. I gathered my things like I was leaving a boardroom, not a battlefield. There was no applause waiting for me, just the cold echo of shoes on marble and a quiet that tasted like justice. Outside the courthouse, the sky was gray but open. The press swarmed, but I didn't give them the satisfaction. Let the headlines write themselves. I didn't need their validation. Every lie my family fed into that courtroom, every half-truth and manipulation, collapsed under one fact: the file. That single piece of evidence I'd carried in my bag, close to my ribs like armor, burned through every false claim they made. It wasn't about winning. I wasn't playing to impress a jury. I reclaimed what was already mine, what they tried to erase: the trust, the shares, the company, the legacy my father built. They thought they could cut me out like a bad line of code. They underestimated how long I'd been rewriting the system. After the hearing, I didn't return to the house I grew up in. That house had long since emptied itself of anything warm. Instead, I moved into the office they once tried to keep me out of. The name on the door didn't change. It had always belonged to me. They just didn't know it yet. Within weeks, I had every signature reversed, every fraudulent asset frozen. The board reassembled under my lead. Even the attorney who once represented my uncle sent flowers with a note that simply read, "Well played." There were no dramatic reunions, no apologies, just a clean line drawn between before and after. They never said sorry, and I never asked them to. I didn't need closure, because I didn't win. I reclaimed, and that is far more dangerous, because when a woman reclaims what was hers, not just wealth, but voice, legacy, and power, she doesn't come back for revenge. She becomes untouchable. They thought I came to fight them. They were wrong. I came to end the story, not with fire, not with revenge, but with finality. You see, winning isn't about loud victories or public approval. It's not even about justice in their eyes. It's about reclaiming your place, on your own terms, quietly, powerfully, and without needing applause. I didn't need them to acknowledge me. I didn't need a seat at their table. I brought my own, and built a better room. And when I walked out of that courtroom, I wasn't carrying just a verdict. I was carrying everything they tried to bury: my name, my power, my history, and the blueprint for what came next. Not all stories end with peace. Some end with clarity. Because the truth is, some families don't break you. They reveal you. They expose the strength you didn't know you had. And when you've walked through that kind of betrayal and still choose not to become them, that's where real power begins. Here's the lesson I've learned, and I hope you carry it with you. You don't need to prove yourself to people who are committed to misunderstanding you. Your life doesn't require their approval. It requires your action, so protect your peace. Move with precision, and when the time comes, reclaim what's yours, not to prove a point, but to prove a pattern wrong. Now it's your turn. Have you ever had to walk away from people you once called family just to protect your future? Share your story in the comments. Someone out there needs to know they're not alone. And if this story struck a nerve, subscribe to the channel for more powerful, untold stories of resilience, revenge, and quiet victories. Your strength deserves a voice, and we're here to tell it. One click might be small, but your support tells us these stories matter, and that keeps us going. Thanks for hearing what most chose to ignore. The truth needed someone to witness it, and that someone was you.